Hey folks, today we're working on, well, it's time to harvest our figs. And actually what we've been doing is we've been picking these guys a little sooner than we should, because we've got a severe bird problem that is really going after things. So once they start getting a little soft, our bird friends are actually picking at these things, and so we can't even get them. So normally we let these guys really ripen for a long time, almost to the point where they're just about hanging off the tree. But at this point, they're these guys at the lower levels are actually probably a few days off. I've got some that I picked already, and I can definitely see that the further up the tree you go, I'm going to let the birds have those top ones, that you can see that they're kind of starting to hang almost like a little sack off the branch. Now figs are kind of a weird thing here in Oregon. This tree is probably now about 25 years old, and we almost lost it in the big freeze of 2009. Matter of fact, it didn't even sprout leaves back coming out of dormancy until July of that year, and I almost thought the tree was dead, and it came back, and it's taken a long time to recover. So here's an example of a ripe fig, or pretty close. It's got a nice yellow color to it. It's actually soft. It kind of feels like a squishy little soft sack, and then if you just lift up, it usually comes right off. So it's got a little bit of damage to it there, but that's not that big of a deal. And we'll take this one in for drying. So here's a classic example of bird damage. You can see they've already been pecking on this one. It's kind of, I apologize, we're in pretty bright light, but they've actually gotten through the skin and they're on the inside. I'm going to take this one anyway, because I personally think, well, it's not really wanting to come off, so it's not exactly ripe. So I guess I'll let the birds have that guy. And that's kind of what we're looking at. We're losing a lot of them. They just keep pecking at them until they rip them open. So this tree is really pretty tall. It's about probably, 16 to 18 feet, maybe a little bit more than that, because I pruned it down about 5 feet. And it's kind of spread out quite a bit. As a matter of fact, it's got a few sprouts down at the base of it. I can take off to get some more trees. This is really a nice fig, and we got it from a gentleman who my wife worked with, Denise worked with, for a number of years, and he loved starting seeds, tree seeds, and starting trees, and he gave this to us as a gift. So we're not really sure what the variety is, but it's really dries well and has a nice sweet flavor. So here's another classic example of bird damage, and you can see they just keep working on these guys, and there's one that they've just almost totally deflated. They ate the whole side of it out. They'll just perch on these things and just keep pecking at them forever. And there's one up there that is just absolutely hardly anything left to it. So the base of the tree can really form a lot of sprouts. I'll be cutting all these water shoots off, but I'm thinking I'm going to try to make some into some new trees. But it's pretty clear that when we do the trees that you have to definitely protect against deer, because you can see they love to eat these things too. Well, I got enough to get started for some drying. It's a pretty big bowl. That's a good start for today. So this is the next step. We're going to be dehydrating these guys on just a regular, this is a Nesco Garden Master air dehydrator. And there really isn't much to it. This is a very simple process. You can just take one of your figs. We're not going to dry the stem, so I'm not going to leave that on there, so I'll cut that off. And then what I do is just slice it down the middle. And when you look at the inside, you can see, okay, the inside's, there's your seed pit and all that. And what I'll do is I'll just use my thumb and just kind of flatten it out. So what I'm looking at now is I've got a basically flat fig. So it's got a thickness here of maybe oh, it's not even a 1/4 inch. And that way it'll dry out faster. I don't bother to skin them or anything like that, dry them with the skins on. And we just simply align them around our tray. So that you want to make certain that when you pick your figs that they are soft and that they have a nice glisten on the inside and that they're not dry. If you pick a fig that is pretty green and say it's dry on the inside, it's not going to have much flavor. It's not going to have much sugar at all. And unfortunately, because I talked about earlier about how the birds were going after these things, I actually picked these guys off the tree probably sooner than I would have. Normally, I usually wait for them to kind of almost look like a little sack hanging there, and they're almost a golden yellow. That would be the highest sugar possible, but these are still pretty good. And what we'll do is we'll use them in all kinds of sauces, things like it goes really well with like making a nice sauce for like a roast pork or something of that nature. I also eat them raw because they're kind of a nice, just they're like a dried fruit. Okay, so how do we dry them? The dehydrator, since these guys have a lot of moisture really up front, what we'll do is we'll run the dehydrator on its max temperature of 160 Fahrenheit for about 2 hours, roughly 2.5 hours. I shoot for 2 hours, and then back the temperature down to 135. Depending on how many trays you got, the more trays, the more moisture there is in them. But on average, what I've seen is it takes about 18 hours to dry, say 5 trays of these guys. So which means that, yeah, it does run, you know, overnight, and it can take, like I said, up to 18 hours. What you want to do is you kind of want to get them at a stage where they're leathery, but not, you know, you don't want to dry them to the point that they get crispy. They still got to have kind of a pliableness to it. All right, so these guys have dried now for over 18 hours, and I want to give you an example of how I store them. I use these are silica gel desiccant packages for food, and they really kind of help keep extra moisture out. So if there's any kind of condensation, this will kind of take care of it. Let me give you an example of some of the dried figs. These are figs from the last time we did it. And you can kind of see the skin turned a little bit. And it's got a pliable, leathery type structure to it. So not completely dried out, but I'd say a good 85% of the moisture is out of these guys, and there's very little moisture left in it. So once they go in the jar, now you can do any size jar you want. I mean, this kind of packet would also, you know, work well with something that's up to a half gallon. And that just keeps the excess moisture, if there is any, left in the fruit. I wait till it's cooled down after I take it off of the, turn off the dehydrator. I'll leave them on the rack and let them cool down for about 15-20 minutes. And then you can pack them away.
Did you have to do any special treatment like ascorbic acid, lemon juice, anything like that?
No, you can, I suppose, if you're worried about browning, but figs are kind of generally brown anyway. You know, from a general standpoint, the sugar on them kind of tends to brown up. I suppose somebody who, you know, wants pure white figs could use a kind of the same thing they do for like apples, where they put a little sulfur in it. But I think that changes the flavor and it's not really that important for figs that, you know, the color isn't dark. So I think it really goes well, because most of it, you know, I mean, I'll eat them plain, but most of the other stuff is just being cooked in with other things, and so it tends to impart their flavor and whatever it's cooked into.
Do you know what type of fig it is?
Yeah, I addressed that earlier in our video when it's outside picking them, and the answer is no, I don't remember the exact variety. It is one that seems to thrive here in the Pacific Northwest, and the tree itself, as I talked about, is probably in excess of 25 years old. We've got that thing probably a couple years after we moved in, and so it's between 25 and 30 years old.
It was a whip.
It was, yeah, just a whip that Denise's old boss gave us because that
We
was
almost lost it one year.
Yeah, in 2009 we had a 2-week period of time where it was a very deep freeze, very, very unusual for this area. And there was, it was one of those things where during the day it wouldn't get above freezing, but it was bright and sunny. So we kind of got a bit of freezer burn on the outside of the tree. As a matter of fact, it didn't break dormancy that year. I think I talked about that earlier until almost July. We thought we lost it. We were actually getting ready to cut it down, and then we started seeing it kind of put out some leaves, and it struggled to come back. So it took about probably 3 or 4 years for it to get back to its full,
easily,
normal tree. And luckily, we haven't had any weather like that since. So
yeah.
But normally, in a normal winter, it'll go dormant, when all the other trees do, and it tends to come out and leaf out in about, I'd say April-ish or so. And then we can start to see the little figs almost immediately when it begins to leaf out.
Isn't this the first year you really had competition with the birds?
Yeah, we've been extremely dry. And some of our neighbors have been cutting out all the brush that birds would normally feed on, like buckthorn berries and things of that nature have been kind of eradicated around us. So the birds are finding our figs and even our apples to some degree. They're kind of pecking at them, where we really haven't had any trouble with that before. I mean, we lose a lot of pie cherries to the birds, but they rarely bothered the figs. But now that they've discovered them, they tend to like them a lot. So yeah, it's a race this year.
Yep.
So anyway, that's it. I mean, a fig tree is really pretty low maintenance. The key to it is probably more than anything else is good pruning, which I can't say that I'm an expert at that, but to kind of keep it shaped within a reasonable size that you can get to the figs. Most of the figs, as what I have noticed anyway, they come out on the second year's growth. So not on new growth, but on the next year. And so they'll tend to be closer to the tips of the branches. And so you kind of gotta, I think, when you're pruning, you gotta kind of take out the dead wood, and you gotta kind of keep an eye for, the usual things when pruning, like crossing branches and things of that nature. I don't know, but this variety might also be, if you prune it aggressively, you might be able to keep it more of a bush size, something that's more like 8 to 10 feet and more shaped like a bush with multiple stems. But we trained ours to one trunk, so it grows like almost like a standard tree.
So 18 hours on dehydrating.
Mm-hmm.
Should we do another type of preservation instead of 18 hours?
Well, there are things you can do, like if you had a freeze dryer, you could use that.
We don't.
You could, I suppose, I haven't got the research on that, but I suppose you could can them. You would probably, they're probably not a low acid fruit, so
the only recipes I have seen are making like fig jam.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, like you end up making a sauce, a jam, a conserve, or something of that nature.
Best for us.
Yeah, but as a whole fruit, I know you could pickle them. No, I don't mean to offend somebody. There's probably somebody in the world that goes, pickled figs are the best.
Sometimes it just doesn't sound right.
Yeah, I think we just found that this works for us.
Gives us more versatility.
Yeah, and you can, this was like, a couple 3 pounds of figs that end up getting squished down into a quart jar. So a couple pounds seems to work out pretty good, pretty economical for space.
Right.
Any other thoughts?
No.
Okay, so we drug this out long enough, a very simple process, and we were able to communicate this to you effectively in 10 minutes, which should have been 3, but
Sorry.
That's beside the point.
I'm taking that all out.
Cut! Anyway, folks, Take care of yourselves. We'll catch you on the next video. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.